This week on Vaticano, Pope Francis makes a pilgrimage to the Italian island of Sicily to commemorate the life of Blessed Giuseppe Puglisi, who was killed by the mafia as he fought corruption. Learn with us the latest updates on the situation of Christians in northern Iraq and how the reconstruction of the Nineveh plain is proceeding after the devastation wrought by ISIS. Travel with us to San Giovanni Rotondo to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Padre Pio's Stigmata. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. On Saturday, September the 15th, Pope Francis made a pilgrimage to the Italian city of Palermo to visit the places of the martyrdom of the Sicilian priest Giuseppe Puglisi, and to celebrate Mass in memorial of the 25 years since he was murdered by the mafia in 1993. In his homily, Pope Francis reflected on the choice everyone must make between love and selfishness.
Those who stuff themselves eventually burst. Those who love, on the other hand, find themselves and discover how beautiful it is to help, to serve. They find joy inside and a smile outside, as it was for Don Pino.
Pope Francis condemned the mafia that killed Blessed Pino on the day of his birthday. The Holy Father said that whoever is a member of the mafia doesn't live as a Christian because his life blasphemes God.
So I say to the mafiosi, change, brothers and sisters. Stop thinking only about yourselves and your money. You know you can't bring them to the grave. You can take nothing with you. Convert to the true God of Jesus Christ, dear brothers and sisters. I say to you, mafiosi, if you do not do this, your own life will be lost, and it will be the worst of defeats.
At the end of the celebration, Pope Francis went to the Hope and Charity Mission to have lunch. After lunch, the Holy Father made a private visit to the house and parish of Blessed Pino Puglisi and headed to the Cathedral of Palermo. The last appointment on his schedule was a meeting with young people at the Politeama Square. In his usual style, the Pope held a conversation with the youth in the form of a dialogue. They asked the Pope some questions, to which he replied using 4 verbs: to walk, to search, to dream, and to serve.
Life is made in commitment, in the struggle, in the denunciation, in the discussion, in risking one's life for an ideal, in dreams. You do this, and so it goes. Being welcoming means being oneself, being at the service of others, getting your hands dirty, and all that I have said. Agree? Do you really agree?
Pope Francis concluded his day-long pilgrimage to Sicily by giving his apostolic blessing to young people, to whom Blessed Pino Puglisi dedicated his life and mission, and on whom is entrusted the continuation of his legacy. Prior to his trip to Sicily, the Holy Father had a busy week of meetings at the Apostolic Palace. The President of Mozambique, Felipe Jacinto Nyusi, invited Pope Francis to visit the country in 2019. The Holy Father, seeming to accept the invitation, replied, "If I'm alive." The Catholic Church in Mozambique is growing. It makes up 30% of a population of 29 million people. The new ambassador of Slovakia to the Holy See, Mr. Marek Lisanski, officially started his diplomatic mission by presenting his credentials to Pope Francis. Mr. Lisanski presented the Pope with a set of figurines of the 17th and 18th century Slovak highwayman and national character, Juraj Janošik, who is often considered the Slovakian Robin Hood. The Holy Father, in turn, handed Mr. Ambassador 4 copies of his writings. Around 62% of Slovaks are Catholics, which makes Slovakia the 4th most Catholic Slavic country, after Poland, Croatia, and Slovenia. During the audience with participants in the conference on Theology of Tenderness, Pope Francis explained how theology and tenderness can go together. He called again for a revolution of tenderness. Pope Francis underscored that when man feels truly loved, he finds himself not only led to love, but also able to transmit the love of God to others, because love is the meaning of life. The Conference on Theology of Tenderness was held September the 14th to 16th in Assisi. Pope Francis received a delegation of high-ranking U.S. church officials to discuss the ongoing sex abuse scandals which have hit the North American church. The president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, traveled to Rome together with Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles, Monsignor Brian Bransfield, and Cardinal Sean O'Malley, who is the head of the Vatican's Commission for the Protection of Minors. Following their private audience with Pope Francis, Cardinal DiNardo released a brief statement through the U.S. Bishops' Conference, calling the meeting with the Pope lengthy, fruitful, and with good exchange. During the audience with participants of the 6th coordination meeting of Catholic charitable organizations operating in Iraq, Syria, and neighboring countries, Pope Francis expressed solidarity with the suffering church. He assured that the Holy See is working hard to guarantee the future of Christians there.
Assuring their protection and future is a civil duty.
The coordination meeting, promoted by the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, together with the Congregation for Oriental Churches, took place from the 13th to the 14th of September at the Pontifical Urban University. Iraqi priest Father Behnam Benoka traveled to Rome to attend this conference. Father Benoka says that such a meeting with the Holy Father gives hope to Christians of Iraq. However, the situation is still unstable.
We hope that maybe the Iraqi government and the local politician and local government may assist the Christian to stay in their original cities, but the reality is not. Everybody now is trying to push Christian out of Iraq.
To help the Iraqi Christians stay, the papal charity Aid to the Church in Need, together with Christian leaders of Iraq, launched a Nineveh Reconstruction Committee on March the 27th, 2017.
Now what we need exactly beside and with this work of the reconstruction, material reconstruction, is to gain our full rights as Iraqi citizen in our country. We are not feeling like normal citizens of Iraq, like Muslims. We need that all the international society and all the diplomats in the world could help us to gain our rights.
Today, only 3,000 Christians out of 15,000 have come back to the city of Bartella.
As an original people of Iraq, we have also a big will to continue living in our original patria.
On August the 3rd, Father Benoka, together with his parishioners, celebrated the restoration of St. George's Parish, which was greatly damaged by ISIS fighters.
And the safety is really very fragile. And as you know, the ISIS is defeated generally, but there's still some cells living and attacking here and there in different places of Iraq. Thanks to the prayers of many brothers and sisters around the world, the Christians, the Catholics especially, are praying. I saw that, I really know that. They are praying every day for us. And this is one of the secrets of how we are continue living there in Nineveh Plain in such a dangerous situation.
Stick around for more on Vaticano. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano. Jeff Fortenberry is an American congressman who recently came back from northern Iraq, where at the request of Vice President Mike Pence, he evaluated America's initial aid package to the region. We caught up with Mr. Fortenberry in Rome after the meeting between Pope Francis and the international group of Catholic legislators in which he participated. You met with Pope Francis this morning. What did he speak to you about?
Well, first of all, it was a beautiful meeting. There were a number of legislators there from around the world. Some had brought their little babies as well. He spoke to us about the importance of the vocation of public service, but also this these two poles that exist in the world, one of a radical secularization of society, a secular relativism, and the other religious radicalism. Of course, the darkest manifestation of that we've seen is ISIS and their attempt to exterminate people simply because of their religious belief, Christians, Yazidis, and other religious minorities, as well as innocent Muslims. So our world is obviously in great duress and stress, but to be in the presence of the Holy Father is quite a comfort, to be honest with you, and quite uplifting and beautiful.
You had the opportunity to be in Iraq recently in July. What did you see there? What are you doing there? What is the U.S. doing there to combat this radical extremism?
We have decided to divert some funds toward the economic rebuilding of northern Iraq, where there used to exist an ancient tapestry of religious pluralism of Christians and Yazidis and Sabak Shia, all of whom were targets of genocide by ISIS. I went at the behest of the Vice President, along with Ambassador Sam Brownback and the head of the United States Agency for International Development, Ambassador Mark Green, to evaluate our initial work at providing humanitarian relief and economic sustainability. The difficulty there is we've got possibility. There are Christians trickling back to their ancient towns. Yazidis, unfortunately, many of whom are trapped in internally displaced camps. But there is a real desire to return home to where they came from. And the economic assistance should be able to help, but we also have a security problem. It's a very delicate security situation, and there's an urgency to try to get that right. So we've proposed some initiatives, both with the Iraqi Prime Minister as well as our own government, to create potentially a multinational training force that would integrate local indigenous people into their own protective forces tied to the Iraqi central government, along with help from the Kurdistan government, the Peshmerga. So that's the next development, hopefully to secure that area of northern Iraq so that people can return to what was once rightfully theirs, and help Iraq develop, once again, establish a healthy pluralism.
If we look at the Christian presence there in particular, what did you see on the ground that needs to be bolstered that people should be aware of?
One of the young priests, he's 36 years old, he came from Rome, he's a Chaldean Christian. He went back to his hometown with 20 young people to try to start over. And just 5 minutes from that very town, they can't return because it's controlled by a militia. So the security question is very significant, it's very delicate, very tenuous. And until that's resolved with, again, a healthy initiative, multinational initiative, centered though on the Iraqi central government, but with local people engaged, it doesn't create the conditions in which more people can return. So we're hopeful that develops quickly. We were also in Bartala with the community there, the Syriac Orthodox community, the Syriac Catholic Christians, as well as in Karamlesh with the Chaldeans who have been rebuilt, primarily by the charity of the Knights of Columbus, which was very beautiful to see.
And how are you working with the Vatican on this rebuilding effort in Iraq?
Well, not directly. Of course, these are United States humanitarian and economic sustainability and subsistence funds. So, but obviously this is a cause for all of humanity. It's not only the just thing to do, it's also America's humanitarian impulse to help people who are in grave need. We've given so much, we've lost so much in Iraq, sometimes it's hard to understand why we must do more. But Americans by impulse, by nature, are charitable and giving. So to help beleaguered people, the most defenseless on earth, return to their ancient homelands, I think is a good use of our funds, and combined with multinational efforts can bring about the conditions for stabilizations there. However, the security component is weak and needs to be fixed, and that was the primary outcome of the trip.
You met with the Pope, with a group of international Catholic legislators. The Pope just recently has changed the Catechism of the Catholic Church to describe the death penalty as inadmissible. How is that a topic of your conversations with these other legislators?
No, it did not. Of course, we in Nebraska have wrestled with this lately with the reapplication of a death penalty in a case. The people of Nebraska have decided that through the ballot, if you will, that this is to be applicable in Nebraska. The Church has long taught that the one in just authority can use the ultimate means of protection, if you will, to protect further loss of life, the innocent people. John Paul emphasized that its applicability in the West, given other measures to protect the innocent being in place, and then Pope Francis has reaffirmed this and elevated it, calling it inadmissible. Now, neither have called it intrinsically evil, so the principles still exist of the potential application. Anyone, though, with a conscience ought to have moral dilemmas about this and struggle with it.
And is this something that you'll be talking with other people about while you're here in Rome, either other legislators or in the Vatican?
Our emphasis will be on the persecution of religious minorities around the world in this central proposition for the 21st century, human dignity. It's what must inform the build-out of just governance space. It's what must inform the proper functioning of market-based systems. It's what must inform the new architecture, if you will, of 21st century international relations if we are to save ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano. More on Vaticano begins now.
This week celebrates the Jubilee year of Saint Padre Pio on the occasion of two very important milestones of his life. The 100th anniversary of when he received the Stigmata on September the 20th, and the 50th anniversary of entering eternal life at 81 years old on September the 23rd. For this occasion, the relics of Padre Pio have been touring around the United States for many devotees to venerate. They include St. Pio's glove, crusts of his wounds, a cotton gauze with St. Pio's blood stains, a lock of hair, his mantle and handkerchief soaked with his sweat hours before he died. But where is St. Padre Pio from? What is his story? San Giovanni Rotondo is a small town in the region of Puglia in the south of Italy. The name of the city is forever linked with one of the most popular contemporary saints, Saint Padre Pio. Today, San Giovanni Rotondo hosts the shrine dedicated to the image of Our Lady of Graces. When the young novice Francesco Forgione, the baptism name of Padre Pio, arrived here on July the 28th, 1916, there was only a convent in the middle of a wood in the wilderness. We're right by the convent where he spent his years, and a convent was established here in the year 1538, and then in the year 1646 was dedicated to Our Lady of Graces. The church Santa Maria delle Grazie, built onto the site of the old church, was built in 1956. Today it is the central focus of the sanctuary, and the repaired and preserved body of Padre Pio is on display in the crypt. Saint Padre Pio suffered intensely through the transverberation, that lance that pierced his side on the 5th of August 1918, then in the Stigmata a month later. The Stigmata, when a person receives them from the Lord, they are a participation in his passion, his death, and so a person is stamped with the same wounds that Jesus Christ had. Entering the convent, we met the friar guardian, Carlo Maria Laborde. Father Carlo leads us through the long corridor to reveal the spiritual heart of the friars.
At the moment, we're in a cell that used to be Padre Pio's room. He started living here 102 years ago, when he arrived in 1916. He came here for health reasons, looking for a more suitable environment for his state of health, and consequently, this small room was assigned to him. This room, Padre Pio practically always kept. It's very important because of some of the events that happened here during those years. Padre Pio was here on August the 5th, 1918, a month before the Stigmata appeared. He was confessing a group of young seminarians in this room, as he was their spiritual director. At a certain point, he tells in a letter addressed to his spiritual director, a mysterious character appeared who threw a kind of iron instrument that pierced his heart, and that character was Christ. Temporarily, the heart of Padre Pio is located here. It was placed in this reliquary that Pope Benedict blessed when he visited this sanctuary on June the 21st, 2009, on the occasion of the exhumation, so the heart was placed in this reliquary. After his death, there were several shirts found with bloodstains. Evidently, Padre Pio had a wound. It's not known if it was permanent. Perhaps he suffered from these wounds while celebrating Mass. He also suffered the flagellation and the crown of thorns. Or maybe they appeared on Fridays or during Lent on some particular day. But certainly this relic proves what John Paul II later said, that Padre Pio had a very painful wound there, that he said it was even the most painful.
Father Carlo explains that this mystical experience of transverberation was the preparation of young Padre Pio for a lifelong mission, which was to suffer together with Christ until the end. Stefano Campanella, author of many books about the saint, gives us more details on this difficult period of the life of Padre Pio.
We are inside the inner chapel of the convent, also known as the Sacculum, where Padre Pio celebrated Mass in solitude from June 1931 until June 1933, when the Holy Office banned him from all priestly activities, with the exception of celebrating the Holy Mass in private at the presence of maximum of one other person.
Stefano says that the worst accusations came from the local clergy. Out of jealousy, they reported to the Vatican that Padre Pio was a greedy and wicked monk, and that his influence was harmful to the people. As a consequence, the Vatican imposed severe restrictions and forbade Padre Pio from public ministry. Replying to this injustice, Padre Pio used to say, "We kiss the hand of our mother." When it is the same hand that disciplines you, do we not kiss that hand? He chose to be obedient to the Church at any cost. After 2 years of obedience, Padre Pio was allowed to return to his public priestly service. Under the tender gaze of Our Lady of Graces, here Padre Pio celebrated daily Mass and heard confessions. This chapel was a well of his spiritual strength and a source of all miracles and graces. Even today, there is a never-ending flow of pilgrims who pray before the Blessed Sacrament and leave prayer petitions at Padre Pio's confessional. At the back of the church on the balcony, we find a big wooden cross. Right here, when in deep prayer, Padre Pio received the Stigmata in 1918. This phenomenon continued for 50 years until the end of his life. Walking through the sacristy, we met Father Marciano Mora setting up things for Mass. Father Marciano is the last living friar in San Giovanni Rotondo who lived with Padre Pio.
Qual è stata la mia prima esperienza?
What was my first impression when I met Padre Pio? He reminded me of a grandfather with his grandchildren. Beautiful. He was so affectionate, kind, and had kind words. He made us laugh, he made us joke.
Ci faceva ridere, ci faceva scherzare.
Father Marciano says that during confession, Padre Pio took sins onto his own shoulders. It was a moment of deep union with the sufferings of Christ, through which we are saved.
Io ho visto le stimmate di Padre Pio.
I saw Padre Pio's stigmata, but I saw them because I was serving Mass. Serving Mass was a privilege. I remember that before leaving, Padre Pio used to stand here and get vested before going to the altar. Before going to the altar, he took his gloves off. Therefore, he used to celebrate Mass without his gloves. Back in the sacristy, Padre Pio allowed his wounded hands without gloves on to be kissed, a great privilege. One morning after I'd served Mass, I went back to the sacristy, and before he put his gloves back on, he offered his hand for me to kiss it. I took it very delicately, and I brought it to my lips. What did I see? I put it back very slowly to take its image in. There was a large scab of blood on it, and where the scab was broken, fresh blood was visible.
Si vedeva il sangue vivo.
The Lord chose to give Padre Pio the stigmata for the sake of the body, the Church. They were a sign to others of his credibility as a confessor, his credibility as a man who could read souls. So people were drawn to Padre Pio because of the stigmata. God used that. But then when they were in his presence, he gave them a word for their lives, certainly to lead them perhaps from sinful ways, lead them from very difficult situations, sufferings, in order that they could encounter the resurrection. Interesting, that for Padre Pio, he bore those stigmata for over 50 years, but then immediately after his death, the stigmata disappeared. So they were a ministry given to him for this life to bring other souls to Christ. They were not for themselves, they were not for sensationalism, but they were truly to bring souls to Jesus.